Okay, 2B, bottom of the page. So we had a contradiction in Rev 2B and Menachos. B, 10 lines from the bottom. So we had a contradiction yesterday in the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was the one who said that either all the flower sacrifices, if you have the wrong intention, it's still good, but then there's also that they're not good. So one of the answers we gave was that Rabbah said it depends. If you have a very visible, if your intent, if your actions are contradict your intent. So you had intent, you're doing A, but you intended to do B, but your actions clearly prove A, so we don't care about your intent, and then it's going to be valid. The only time you're going to have an invalidation is going to be when your intent is not clearly recognizable. So now I'm going to go through 10 questions, maybe 8 questions. Siman Olas, Olamala, Kumitza, Chatas, O, Kache Kadashim, Kache Kalim. And we're going to ask a bunch of questions on this idea that when your intent, good morning, that when your intent is not clearly recognizable, then it's going to cause a invalidation. So the first of these questions is as follows. Ela Me'ata, I can get stuck in there, right? You do a perfect job? Okay. So I'm going to get stuck in about 30 minutes. I got stuff. Okay. Ela Me'ata Ola Sa'of. So you have, there's the Ola Sa'of, the bird offering, that's an Ola, and the bird offering, that's a Chatas. Now, the Ola Sa'of is brought on top of the altar. The Chatas is brought on the bottom. Now, in Chatat, a Ola Sa'of, Malka Lemala, you do Malika on top of the altar, but you have in mind Mishum Chata Sa'of. You have in mind a Chata Sa'of. Even though you're doing, it's an Ola, it's supposed to be a fully consumed bird offering. However, you have in mind a sin offering, a bird sin offering. So that's going to be Teirotza. That should be good, no? Because you're doing an Ola, you're having in mind a Chatas, but your Ma'aseha should be Mochichin Alaha. Your actions, who cares about your intent? Your actions are clearly proving that it's an Ola. Why are my actions clearly proving it's an Ola? The Ola Sa'ofi. Why? The Ichata Sa'ofi, if it was really a bird sin offering, so then Lematahu Avidlei. So you would apply the blood on the bottom part of the altar. So therefore, since you're doing it on the top of the altar, even though you have in mind that it's a Chatas, but we don't care because your actions are clearly visible to us. When your actions are clearly visible, so then that's not going to be an invalidation, and it should be good. But yet it's not. So why not? According to Rabbah, according to Reb Shimon, it should be good. So it says the Gemara, Atu chata sa'of lemala mi lesa, achata sa'of, Atu. There's 220 on Zoom, by the way. That's fine. Okay. Just add that into the thing. That's what I'm saying. Add that in. That's all. So okay. So says the Gemara, is that really true? When last time someone told you what to do at 6 in the morning, huh? He's a boss all day. Now he's told what to do. It's good for him. It humbles him down. He knows we see that already. Okay. So he knows me too. I still don't tell him what to do. So says the Gemara, hold on. Is there really no such thing as a chata sa'of on top of the altar? Meaning, if we find you a case that even a bird sin offering would be valid in the same place as a ola sa'of, so then your actions are no longer recognizable. Therefore, and I'll prove it to you. Mar says, Malika b'chol makom b'mizbeach sheira. Malika, that's done at any point of the altar, is going to be good. Maybe ideally an ola should be done on top of the altar, but if it's not, it's still kosher. Post facto, but the evidence still kosher. So therefore, you can't consider that action of Malika on top of the altar as clearly recognizable to validate your offering, even though you had in mind a different offering, and that's why it's going to be invalid, even according to Rabbah, even according to Rav Shimon. Okay. Question number 2 on this idea that when your actions are clearly recognizable, so then that's not going to be an invalidation. An invalidation for Rabbi Shimon, when you have the wrong intent, is only when your actions are not recognizable. So, right, the example we had was when you slaughter an animal. But there you slaughter an animal, you can have in mind this animal or that animal, it's the same slaughtering. There your action is not recognizable. However, in our case, your actions by a flour offering, they could be recognizable. So you're going to put the flour offering into a different pan, deep frying pan or not. Okay, next question. Ola sa'of shemitza dama lamala l'shem chatas sa'of teiratzah. A ola sa'of, a bird, fully consumed bird offering that you did mitzvah. Now, there's two things. There's hazah and there's mitzvah. So, hazah usually means sprinkling. In this case, mitzvah would mean you're actually, the way at least Rashi here learns is that mitzvah is a kind of squeezing, meaning you put the bird, some say maybe on the altar, right next to the altar, and it squeezes the bird, and the blood squeezes out onto the altar. That's called mitzvah. Hazah usually is we sprinkle the blood, but in this case with the bird, you take the bird and you wave it, and the blood spurts out. The one's called hazah and one's called mitzvah. So now, ola sa'of shemitza dama lamala. If you have an ola sa'of shemitza dama lamala, that you do mitzvah dama lamala. The blood squeezes out. So on top of the altar where it's supposed to be l'shem chatas sa'of, but you have in mind a chatas sa'of. So we should say teiratzah. We should say it still should be good, even if you had the wrong intention. Why? Because ma'aseha mochichin aleh. Your actions clearly prove that what you're doing is ola sa'of things. For example, ola sa'ofi. Why? The chatas sa'ofi. If it was really a chatas sa'of, it was a sin offering, a bird sin offering. So then lemata havi avle hazah. A sin offering, you have to do hazah. Of ola, you don't do hazah. You only do mitzvah. You only put it, and just that initial blood that squeezes out goes onto the altar, but you don't shake it around and have the blood spurt out. That's only by a chatas. So look at what you're doing. Did you do any hazah? No, you only did a mitzvah. So if you only did a mitzvah, that's by an ola. So even though you had in mind a chatas, however, we clearly see that your actions show us that you're doing an ola. So therefore, we should disregard the fact that you had in mind the chatas. That's irrelevant to us, according to Rabbah, according to Reb Shimon. So, and therefore, it should be valid. So why is it not valid? Next page. So on that, the Gemara says, Amri, Dilma Mitzui, the Basar Hazahu. Well, hold on. It's not fully recognizable that you're dealing with an ola. Why? Because even after hazah, there's something called mitzvah. Even by a chatas, after you do the hazah, you do the shaking around the bird and getting the blood onto the altar, you do there's also a mitzvah that's done. The Amar Mar, as Mar says, mitzvah dama b'chol makom b'mizbeach kshera. That mitzvah at any point on the altar is going to be good. So even though by a chatas you do hazah and then mitzvah, however, when someone sees you do mitzvah, they don't know for sure that you're doing an ola. It could be that you're sacrificing a chatas offering, because mitzvah is also done by a chatas after the hazah. So therefore, that's not clearly recognizable. The only way we're going to validate the offering when you have the wrong intention is if your actions are clearly 100% recognizable. As long as people might think or might confuse it, but then that's not going to be clearly recognizable, and that's why your bad intent will invalidate this offering. Third question. You have a bird sin offering that you sprinkle the blood lemata l'shem olas of, that you sprinkled it below where a chatas is supposed to be l'shem olas of. So you did a chatas now, but you had in mind an ola. So we should say teiratzah. We should say it should appease for the owner. Why? Your actions clearly show us your intent. Why? The chatas ofi. We see it's a chatas of. The olas of. What do you want to say? Maybe it was a bird offering, and therefore he had a bad intent, and it should be invalid. The olas ofi lamala havi avidla. If it was an olas of, well, an ola is done on top of the altar, not below, not applying the blood on the bottom of the altar. It's done on top of the altar. So the fact that you're doing it below, even if you have in mind, or even if you speak out, Rashi told us yesterday, even if you speak out that it's going to be for an ola, that's irrelevant because your actions showing us that it's a chatas. So The e ola of he lamala havi avid le umitzu havi avid l'chayev was an ola. So then you should have done it above on the altar, and you should have done a mitzu. So that shows us that really it's a chatas, and therefore it should be valid. So says the Gemara, Hachanami, you're right. According to Reb Shimon, it's going to be valid. It is going to be valid. So Elo lefi shein menachos domos lezvachim kamar lezvachim v'lo le'ofos. Reb Shimon said that the menachos are not similar to the animal sacrifice. With menachos, you have if you want, there's, let's say, the voluntary flour offering. You have 5 kinds of pans that you use for a voluntary flour offering. So there, if you have in mind, one pan, but you put it into another pan, that's clearly recognizable, as opposed to an animal when you slaughter it or you accept the blood, that's all the same act. So there you'll say, if you have the wrong intention, it's going to be invalid. However, he never spoke about the birds. So we're qualifying Rabbi like Reb Shimon that this disqualification was specifically by flour offerings, coming to exclude animal offerings, but not coming to exclude bird offerings below the opos. And therefore, the bird offerings are going to have the same, you're going to have the same halacha that if your actions are that clearly recognizable, so then it's going to be valid. Okay. Now, on to animal sacrifices. And question number 4. Kache, kadashim, shishaktim, b'tzafon. We know that there's 2 kinds of kachim. You have the very holy sacrifices and the lesser holy sacrifices. Tapas is a very holy sacrifice. There are more rules and they're more strict. And you have the lesser sacrifices like a shlomim, and it's going to be more lenient. You can eat it. You have more time to eat it. You can eat it in more locations. So what happens if kachim, you take a kachim, a very holy sacrifice, like a chatos, and you slaughter it in the north, but you have in mind a shlamim, you have in mind a peace offering, the shem kachim kalim. So says Gemara, leiratzu, that should be good. Your bad intent should not invalidate this offering. Why? Your actions should show us what your intention is. And the kachim kadashim, and clearly, since you're slaughtering this in the north, it's going to be a very holy sacrifice. It's going to be kachim kadashim. Why? The kachim kalim, if it was a lesser holy sacrifice. So, bidarom have avidlahu, he would have slaughtered it in the south where you slaughter the other sacrifices. So, from the fact that he slaughtered it in the north where the very holy sacrifices are, we don't care that his intention was for a lesser holy sacrifice because your actions are showing us what you mean. So, says the Gemara, no. Aim hardam rachmana af bidarom. So, Bidarim below B'tzofon miyamar. You're making a big assumption over here. The assumption is that when it said you could slaughter the animals in the south, the lesser holy sacrifices. Remember, the south means that this is our pearl and prop, yeah. So this is the mizbeach over here. This is the altar. The north is always corresponding right over here. So it's parallel to the altar. So in this area, you slaughter the holy sacrifices. South is over here. There, you're allowed to slaughter the lesser holy sacrifices. The Gemara made an assumption that when it said south, it meant south and not north. That the Gemara is saying that's not what it means. It doesn't mean south and not north. It means also south. So just because you slaughtered a sacrifice in the northern part, that could be either a very holy sacrifice or a lesser holy sacrifice. It could be either one. And therefore, when you have the wrong intention, your actions are not clearly recognizable, and therefore it's going to be invalid. So, when Hashem said that you could slaughter it in the south, a shlamim, he didn't mean south and not north. He meant also in the south. And therefore, you can slaughter in the north. And therefore, if you have the wrong intention, it will be invalid. And that's not an example of actions being clearly recognizable of what you're doing. So, how do I know this? It says you can do shchita in the whole courtyard, in the whole azara, whether it's in the north or the south. It's referring to the lesser holy sacrifices. So therefore, this is not an example and not a problem for Reb Shimon, because here the actions are not clearly recognizable and showing us what you're doing. It could be confused. It could be either this sacrifice or that sacrifice. When you can confuse, so then Rabbi Shimon will say, according to Rabbah, that having the wrong intent is going to invalidate. When you cannot confuse, it's clearly recognizable, so then they'll say that the intention is not going to invalidate. Okay. Question number 5. Kachim kalim shachtan b'darim l'shem kachim kadashim. Go the other way. You have kachim kalim sheshachtan b'darim that you slaughtered in the south, but you had in mind the shem kachim kadashim. So you're having a shlomim, let's say, which is a lower level sanctity sacrifice, and you have in mind now when you're slaughtering it that a very holy sacrifice. So we should say le'ratzu. That should be good. It should appease for you. Why? Because ma'asehen mochichin aleihem. Now here it's going to be a better question because why? The kachim kalim ninhu. Clearly, the fact that you're slaughtering in the south shows us that it's a lower level sanctity. Why? Because the kachim kadashim, if it was a higher level sanctity sacrifice like a chatas or an asham, you have to do it in the north. You cannot do it in the south. Before we said the south could be done in the north, but the north sacrifices cannot be done in the south. So now here's going to come a statement which is going to get us going on more questions based on this statement. Maybe you'll say like this. Maybe you'll say that right now he has a lower level sanctity sacrifice. Let's say a shlomim. He's slaughtering it in the south where he's supposed to. He's having in mind that it should be a chatas. So this should be an example where your actions clearly show us that it's not a very holy sacrifice. It's not a chatas because you're doing it in the south. However, maybe people will say, Amri, maybe really it's still not 100% identifiable. Why? Because people are going to say that it's really a plus, and you made a mistake and you slaughtered it in the south. So just because you slaughter in the south doesn't show us that it has to be a lower level sanctity sacrifice. Maybe it's really a higher level sanctity sacrifice, and what you did was you slaughtered it in the south and you violated what you're supposed to do. So therefore, it's not 100% recognizable. Now, here where it gets complicated. This idea that what people are going to say is going to be enough to make it not recognizable is now we're going to have a question back to the flour offering. If that's true, so then machabas l'shem marcheshes nami. So you have two different kinds of pans. You have a pan, you have a deep frying pan. So that was the example that Reb Shimon said, where your actions are clearly identifiable because you're supposed to offer it in one pan and you go and offer it in a deep frying pan. So I don't really care what you had in mind. At the end of the day, we see that you put the flour offering into a deeper frying pan. So that's clearly what you want your sacrifice to be. Well, one second. If you're going to say what we just said, maybe you'll say, this gets a little complicated, so you have to help me. Maybe when you have a machabas, a regular flour pan offering, but you have in mind another pan offering, a marcheshes, you have in mind a deep frying pan. So what's going to happen? You'll say as follows: maybe he did a kmitza for a marcheshes, for the deeper frying pan, and Amar Haiba Marcheshes Neder, the Had the Maisel B'Machabas, the Marcheshes he, Uma'avar Hu the Avar, the Asya B'Machabas. So maybe you'll say as follows: that really the guy scooped up for a marcheshes, for a flour offering, and the marcheshes, the deep frying pan, was his neder, was his vow that he has to fulfill. He brought it in a machabas, in a regular frying pan, in a regular pan. The had the ma'isa b'machabas. So really, it really should be a marcheshes. It's just he violated what he's supposed to do, and he's supposed to bring it in a marcheshes, in a deep frying pan, but he violated what he's supposed to do, and he brought it in a machabas. So maybe that should still be good. So says the Gemara, those two are not comparable. Offering an animal in the south versus bringing something in a different frying pan are not comparable. Why? Hasam kinambi b'marcheshes neder. So when you vowed to bring a flour offering in a deep frying pan called a marcheshes, and you brought it in a machabas in a regular pan, that's still considered a machabas. It can't. Your pan will determine what it is. How do I know? As we're going to find out in about 100 days. As it says in the Mishnah, the guy says, I want to bring. It's upon me to bring. He makes another. It's upon me to bring a pan offering, b'machmas, and he brings it in a deep frying pan. Or the other way, he wants to bring b'marchesh in a deep frying pan, v'hevi b'machmas, in a regular frying pan, in a regular pan. Sorry, hevi b'machmas. So mashe hevi, whatever you bring, you bring. But you didn't fulfill your vow. So either way, we're not going to say that now that you brought in a machabas fulfills your marcheshes, and now that you brought in your marcheshes fulfills your machabas. No, that's not how it works. Whatever you brought it in, and your vow you didn't fulfill. So you can't compare our flower offerings to the animal offering. Now, says the Gemara, "V'dilma amar zu lahavi b'machavas behavi b'marcheshes." Now a little bit more nitty gritty, which we have to find out more in 100 days from now when we're off camera. Yeah. So maybe he'll come every day. Look at what everyone's listening. We got more memory. We doubled in size. Yeah. So anyway, so it says zu. It says in the Mishnah, zu lahavi b'machavas behavi b'marcheshes. It lets you say this, not upon me, but this. This I'm going to bring in my pan, behavi b'marcheshes, and you're going to bring it in a deeper frying pan, or go the other way. This I'll bring in my deep frying pan, behavi b'machabas, and you bring it in a regular pan, harei zip psula, that's going to be invalid. So says the Gemara, lirabanan, harei zip psula, lirabanan, and hachanami l'Reb Shimon. You're right. According to Reb Shimon, so this is going to be invalid. But we go like Reb Shimon. And according to Reb Shimon, cave and Amar Reb Shimon, Afide Nidro Yatsa. So Alma Kviyusa Demana Velo Klumhi. Velo Shna Amar Zu, Velo Shna Amar Alai. According to Reb Shimon, the whole thing doesn't start. According to Reb Shimon, everything is dependent on the actual vessel that you brought it in. Whether you said Hare Zu, Hare Alai, for Reb Shimon is irrelevant. All that matters to Reb Shimon is the vessel that you brought it in. So according to Reb Shimon, when you bring it into a machabas, it's a machabas. When you bring it in a marcheshes, it's a marcheshes. Even if you said Hare Zu, you said Hare Alai, we don't care. All we care about is the vessel you brought it in. So according to Reb Shimon, it's not going to be a question. Okay, fine. So we stay strong with that rebuttal earlier that when you have a holy sacrifice, like a kachah, a very holy sacrifice, kachah kadashim, sacrifice in the south, so that's not an automatic. Your actions don't automatically show us what you mean, because people might say he violated and he went and slaughtered it in the south, but that's not going to apply by the flower offerings, because according to Reb Shimon, all that matters is the vessel that you bring it in. Okay. Now, if this is true, so Elameata, question 6, 7, Elameata, Ola sheshachal l'shem katas, in Ola, a fully consumed offering that is slaughtered, it is shechted l'shem chatos for a sin offering, keiratza. Okay, so here we get a little bit nitty gritty with our genders and with our animals. So, so Elameata, what is there? It's too good. Yeah, Elameata. Okay, no jokes. Elameata ola sheshachal l'shem chatas keiratza. A ola that's slaughtered for a chatas is going to appease. Why? A chatas is a female. You can only bring a female offering as a chatas, and ola is going to be a male. So this should be another example of who cares what you have in mind. Look at the offering. Is it male? Is it female? So when ola, which is a male, and a chatas, which is a female, even though you have in mind for the sake of a chatas, but clearly we see it's an ola because it's a male. So it says the Gemara not so fast. Why? Kavan the ikas ear nasi the zacharu. So loyadia. So there is an example. There's one offering that is a male chatas, and that is going to be the higo that the nasi brings when he makes a mistake, and the shogeg he rules and makes a mistake, so he has to now bring a seer nut. That's the zacharu. That's the zacharu. Okay. So now we don't know what the animal is. Is it a ola or is it a chatas? So says the word, okay, fine. But Amar l'shem chatas yachid ma'ikal l'memer. If the guy brings an ola and he says, I'm bringing this for the sake of a personal sin offering, which is always a female animal. So how could that be an invalidation? According to Reb Shimon, according to Rabbah, according to Reb Shimon, your actions clearly define for us what you're doing. We see you bringing a male offering. So saying I want to bring a female offering is going to be irrelevant. Visu, furthermore, go the other way. A guy brings a sin offering that you slaughter for the sake of an olah. But that should also be valid. And we know that's not true. It should be valid. Why? A chatos is a female offering, and an olah is a male offering. So why should that intent invalidate when your actions clearly show us what you're doing? Now, here we get more nitty-gritty with the animals. So, Zachar, says the Gemara, the chatas nekeva of olah zachar. Yeah, okay, but says the Gemara, not so fast. That mechasya. But we say, but mechasya ba'alya. Okay, but the animal's tail is going to cover over the area of the animal that shows us, is it a male animal or is it a female animal? So it's going to cover over. Therefore, you don't know. Oh, since you don't know if it's a male or a female, if you clearly confused, that's enough that your actions are not 100% clear and identifiable what you're doing, and therefore the wrong intent will invalidate. Says the Gemara, that's good when you bring a lamb, right? But icy se'ira, when you bring the goat, there's no tail. So Michael Lamema, you bring a goat and you have in mind the chatas. So you bring a male goat and you have in mind a chatas, which is a female. So what are you going to say over there? The olah is a male. The chatas is a female. And here there's no tail. Michael Lamema. There also now your actions are clearly identifiable according to Rabbah, according to Reb Shimon, and therefore it should not invalidate. So Ella, what are you going to say? Bein zacharim lenekevos lav adaitayu de inshi. At the end of the day, the sacrifices are being brought, animals are being brought. People aren't focusing so much what the gender of the animal is. So therefore, it's very interesting that because people don't, that's not what people notice. They think about when you bring in animals. Therefore, that's considered. That goes very interesting. That goes under the category of your actions not being clearly recognizable. So here it's more subjective, meaning people don't recognize it. Therefore, that's not going to be something which will be valid, and it will be an invalidation. We added a new factor. We need something that not only is in reality clearly identifiable, but even in perception of people is clearly identifiable. These people don't usually think about these things. Therefore, that's not clearly identifiable. Okay. Question number 7. So Pesach sheshachtu l'shem asham. Pesach offering that was slaughtered for the sake of an asham, for the sake of a guild offering. Leirotza. It should appease. Why? Because your action is clearly identifiable. Why? Gehayi ben shana, v'hayi ben shtayim. So the Pesach offering has to be a year old, right? And the asham it has to be less than a year old, and the asham is less than 2 years old. So once again, you see here that the ages that shows you that this one's much smaller animal, it's much younger than the other animal. That should be something which is clearly identifiable, and therefore it should be valid. Says Gemara, no. Kaven the ika asham nazir asham mitzora lo psikale. We have categories of an asham, the one that a nazir brings and the one that a mitzora brings when they finish off their mitzora time or their naziros, that they also are less than 1 year old, which is the same as a Pesach. So bringing a less than 1 year old animal is not clearly identifiable that it's a Paschal offering. Maybe it's this kind of asham offering. Okay, but what if you said when you bring in the Pesach offering, you said Omar l'shum asham zelos u'l'shum asham ilos. You're having in mind the asham zelos, special asham you bring for a certain act of stealing, a special asham you bring for violating when you're misusing property, basic English property. It's called me'ilah. So in those cases, what are you going to say, Michael Amemar? That's one visu. Furthermore, asham zelos go the other way. Asham me'ilah sheshachtu l'shem Pesach that you slaughter for the sake of a Pesach. Beirotzu. That should appease. Why? The Pesach ben shana, because a Pesach is 1 year old and less than 1 year old. These are less than 2 year olds. The honey ben shtei shanim. So says the Gemara once again, same as before. Ela ben shana ben shtei shanim lav adaitayu the inshi. The ika ben shana the Mexican ben shtayim. The ika ben shtayim the Mexican ben shana. At the end of the day, a 1 year old or a 2 year old is not so recognizable because they're a very mature, 6-month-old animals, and there are immature, less than 2-year-old animals. So therefore, that difference is not so recognizable, and therefore it will be an invalidation. Okay, question number 8. Seir shachtu l'shum asham. So let's see. So let's say you have a he-goat that you're slaughtering for the sake of an asham. That should appease. Okay. Now, why? The hayit semer, v'hayit seir. So you have a he-goat that you have in mind in asham. Now, on the sheep you have wool. On the he-goat you have hair. So clearly your action should be clearly identifiable that, well, one's going to have hair and one has wool. So says the Gemara, so people would say, Dikra uchmahu, that people would say that this male animal is going to have blackened hair, meaning it's also not something which is clearly identifiable, that people are going to say that when you have this animal, and it's going to be it's really an ayal shakas, like a black sheep, and therefore it's going to be and therefore that's also not something which is clearly identifiable. Okay, now in egel upar, number 9, egel upar sheshaka l'shum pesach. So you take a calf, right, a calf or a par or a bull, sheshaka l'shum pesach, and you want to slaughter it for your paschal offering for l'shum pesach, the asham or for an asham. So it's a leiratzu. It should appease. It should go for it. It should work for your offering. It should not be out. It should be valid. Why? The egel upar, the pesach asham, because there's no such thing as the baby calf or a bull by a paschal offering or an asham offering. So says the Gemara, einachanami. Yeah, you're right. Turn the page. You're right. So that which Rabbi Shimon made this statement that said that menachos, flour offerings, are different than slaughtered animal offerings. So he didn't mean every single case. Most offerings, it's all one thing. It's all one slaughtering, and therefore your intent is not identifiable. But yes, if you found this case would be a case even by an animal that's slaughtered, which is clearly identifiable, and therefore you're right. It would be valid and not invalid. Correct. So, okay, now back to reconcile this contradiction in Reb Shimon. That was all Rabba's attempt. However, we need it now. We're going to have 2 more answers. So once again, the first Reb Shimon made a general statement: all menachos for the wrong reasons, you have the wrong intention, are all going to be kosher. The second Reb Shimon said it's not true. It's like a chatas and like an asham. That if you do kmitza shalom l'shma, it's going to be invalid, like a chatas. And so what does Reb Shimon hold? Does he say that all menachos are offered for the wrong reason are going to be valid or not valid? So Rava has another answer. Rava Amar Lo Kasha kan b'kometz mincha l'shum mincha and kan b'kometz mincha l'shum zeva. So it depends. Are you scooping up the mincha, the knitza, for the sake of another mincha, or are you scooping it up for the sake of a slaughtered animal, or like a chatas offering, for a chatas animal offering? So says the Gemara, so mincha l'shum mincha for the sake of another mincha offering is going to be fine. Why? Because it says v'zos Torah mincha. This is the category of a mincha, which tells us Torah achas l'kol menachos, one category for all the menachos. So even though you deviated from the machabos to the marcheshes, at the end of the day, it's a difference, but they're still under the same category. Yeah, people can have differences, but they're still hopefully under the same category, so they should still be valid. So Torah achas l'kol menachos. So now, mincha l'shum zevach, a flour offering for the sake of an animal, a slaughtered animal offering. So it says v'zos Torah hamincha. It doesn't say that it's going to be an animal offering. It says zos Torah mincha. It's one category for all the flour offerings, not for the slaughtered offerings. Okay. Says the Gemara, okay, but Rabbi Shimon himself said, which was where Rabba was coming from, the explanation seems to be for Rabbi Shimon because the reason why it's valid is because your actions are showing us what you're doing, not because it's under one category. So how, according to Rava, do you read that part of the brisa which seems to give an explanation for Reb Shimon that your action shows what you're doing. According to Rava, it has nothing to do with your action. So Hachi covered this, so I have to read it. Afal gav de machshava lo mintra, even though your thought process is not recognizable, and that should invalidate. However, v'zos Torahs amincha, Torahs achas l'kol menachos. At the end of the day, it says Torahs amincha. It's going to be one category for all the menachos, and therefore they're going to be valid, even though you have in mind a different flower offering, which is not so recognizable. But at the end of the day, since it says those Torahs amincha, it's all under one category, so therefore it's going to be valid. Okay, continuing to pick on the language of the Brisa, Umay aval bezvachim eino kain. What does the language mean when it says, but by slaughtered offerings, it's not like that? Umay aval bezvachim eino kain. Hafagab the shchitas achas lekulan. Even though by regular slaughtered animals, it's one slaughter, it's one shchita. Still, the zos Torahs hamincha the zevach lotzif. It says only zos Torahs hamincha. It doesn't say that by a slaughtered offering. So by the slaughtered offering, by the animals that you slaughter, there it doesn't have this the zos Torahs hazevach. It doesn't say that. This is one category for all the slaughtered animals. Therefore, if you have a different intention, it's going to be invalid. But by the menachos, where you have a different intention, there the Torah tells you, according to Rava, zos Torahs hamincha. It says it's one category for all the menachos. Okay. Now, elamiyata, according to this reasoning, chatas chela. A person, God forbid, ate a forbidden fat that he wasn't supposed to, and he did it b'shogeg. He didn't know. He thought it was a regular food from the JCC Tuesday night. And turns out he finds it afterwards that Alan messages him that it's actually forbidden fat. So now he eats forbidden fat. So now what happens? You have to bring that sacrifice. When you go and the Kohen now shechs it, but he has in mind l'shem chatas dam, or for chatas for eating blood that you're not supposed to, or l'shem chatas, or you did idol worship inadvertently that you weren't supposed to, obviously, and you have to bring a chatas for that. So now you're bringing a chatas for the chaylev that you ate inadvertently, but the Kohen has in mind these other things. Or l'shem chatas nazir, or l'shem chatas mitzorah. All of these things, when you have different chatas in mind, it should all be valid. Why? Take sheira v'teirotza. Why? The Omer Achmana, the Torah says, v'zos Torahs achatos. There's one category for the chatos. No, Torahs achas chol chatos. So according to that, it should be valid. Says the Gemara, according to Rava, l'Reb Shimon hachanami. You're right. According to Reb Shimon, it will be valid. You're right. According to this reason, that whenever it says those Torahs, it's going to make all those things valid. So you're right. But l'Rabbanan, l'Reb Shimon hachanami, but l'Rabbanan hamar Rava, chatas chela sheshakal l'shem chatas dam l'shem chatas v'kavim sheira. But according to the Rabbanan, he's going to split. Rabba's going to say that if you slaughter this chalev animal, the chatas chalev, you're bringing for eating chalev inadvertently, and you slaughter for the sake of a chatas dam, or for the sake of idol worship, that's going to be sheira. That is going to be good. However, l'shem chatas nazir and l'shem chatas mitzorah, but if you have in mind that it's going to be for your nazir or for your mitzorah, that's going to be invalid already. Why? The honey olos the hadayuninu. Okay, I got a little stuck. There's three explanations of Rashi what this means. That these animals, the chatas of the mitzorah and the chatas or the chatas of the nazir, are olos the hadayuninu. So, since you could say that they're being brought as an olos nazir, so since you could say it's being brought as an olos nazir, so then therefore it'll be valid. Or these are really ola offerings, and they're not coming for any sin. You just finished your nazir's process, or you finished your mitzvah process. So they're called the chatas, but they're not really a chatas because they're not really coming for a sin offerings. So that's already categorically different than your chatas chayla, which you're bringing for a sin. Yeah, maybe we'll go with the second one. That's easier. That really, the offerings you bring at the end of your nazir's process or the end of your mitzvah process, they're not really for any sin per se. So therefore, they're really more like olas. Therefore, when you have in mind for your chayla, you have in mind the other offering, that's more like having in mind a ola, and that's why it's going to be invalid. Rav Acha, one more line. Rav Acha Brei the Rava Ma'asdila Lekulu Lipsula. He said no. The Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said that they're all going to be invalid because it says V'shachar also lechatos shem also chatos. He learned that when you're slaughtering the chatos, it has to be for that chatos. It cannot be for any other chatos. So you have three opinions. You have Rabbi Shimon who holds, according to Rava, that they're all going to be valid. You have Rava himself for the Rabbanon that's going to split and say if it's for another chatas, it'll be valid. But if it's for something which is a little bit different, like these offerings of the Nazir and the Mitzorah, it's going to be invalid. And you have Rav Acha that's going to say that no, that every chatas has to have in mind for itself, and it cannot be in mind for something else, and therefore it's going to be invalid. Okay, I guess I'll continue with Rav Ashi to what place tomorrow? Whatever you want. Usually 6:10. Huh? You want to try to catch up?
Well, I mean,
You know, like a rat race until we catch up.
I mean, we kind of on
That's okay, no?
yeah, that's okay.
Maybe Shabbos will catch up. He has a chance. Daf Yomi is a short on it. Things are long. Oh, he's short also. 13 is short. Get excited. He's your friend? He's your friend? Does he know you?
Well, he knows me through John.
How's he know Joe?
You have a problem.
How's he know Rob?
He was here. He was here.
Oh, he lived there.
No, he doesn't.
Again, there was a got it. Yeah. But this is not for like the Agudas in the shots. It's for his own thing.
No.